I still remember the night I stumbled upon Dead City like it was yesterday. It was as if the city itself was calling to me, drawing me in with an otherworldly allure. I'd always been fascinated by the urban legends surrounding this forsaken place, how it was once a thriving metropolis, but a century ago, something went horribly wrong, and its residents were never seen again. Theories abounded. Occult rituals gone wrong, government experiments gone awry, or even a catastrophic event that had torn the very fabric of reality apart. Whatever the truth may be, I knew I had to see it for myself. As I stepped off the train, the cool evening air enveloped me like a shroud. The city's skyline stretched before me like a dark, twisted forest, with towering skyscrapers looming like skeletal sentinels. I felt an inexplicable sense of unease, as if the very ground beneath my feet was listening to my every move. I began my exploration of Dead City with a visit to the local library, a labyrinthine repository of ancient texts and dusty tomes that seemed to whisper secrets in the silence. The librarian, an elderly woman with sunken eyes, greeted me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but something about her expression, a flicker of recognition perhaps, made me trust her. "No," I replied. "I'm just passing through." She nodded knowingly, as if aware that the city's secrets were only accessible to those who knew where to look. That night, I found myself walking through the deserted streets, feeling an unsettling sense of disorientation. The city seemed to shift and twist around me like a living, breathing entity. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was betraying some unseen force that lurked just beneath the surface. And then I saw it, a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure, tall and imposing, watching me from the shadows. I spun around, but there was no one there. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying an unsettling whisper that seemed to caress my skin. "You shouldn't be here." I quickened my pace, feeling a creeping sense of dread that I couldn't shake. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I walked through the city's streets, I began to notice something strange. Whispers. Faint, almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard my name being called Emily. Emily, in a soft, raspy voice that sent shivers down my spine. I followed the sound of my own name, which led me to an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The building loomed before me like a monolith, its stone facade cracked and worn, as if it had been drained of all life force over the years. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and I could feel the air thickening with tension. I wandered deeper into the church, my footsteps echoing off the cold stone. The whispers seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was as if the walls themselves were trying to communicate with me. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, gaunt, and impossibly pale, it regarded me with eyes that seemed to bore into my very soul. "Welcome," it whispered, its voice like a sigh on the wind. "We've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure began to move towards me, its movements fluid and unnatural. I knew then that I was in grave danger. As I turned to flee, I saw it, a scrawled message on the wall in letters that seemed to shift and writhe like living serpents. "They come for you tonight," it read. "Don't try to run." I stumbled out of the church, into the cool night air, feeling as though I'd been left shaken and broken. But I knew then that I was in Dead City, where the very walls seemed to hold secrets and terrors beyond human comprehension. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The whispers would grow louder, the shadows would deepen, and I would be forced to confront the darkness that lurked within these forsaken streets. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that settled over me like a shroud. But as I walked through Dead City streets, I began to notice something new, shadows moving of their own accord. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I saw them, dark, twisted shapes darting between the buildings, always staying just out of reach. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart, allowing some malevolent force to slip through the cracks. I followed one of these shadows, which led me down a narrow alleyway that seemed to stretch on forever. The air was thick with the stench of decay and rot, and I could feel the weight of the city's dark history bearing down upon me. As I walked, the shadows grew larger, more menacing, until they seemed to be closing in around me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that seemed to be coming from the very walls themselves. I spun around, but there was no one there. The footsteps stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the alleyway like a shroud. Then I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, watching me with eyes that glowed like embers. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The figure began to move towards me, its movements slow and deliberate. As it stepped into the light, I saw that it was a woman, or what was left of one. Her skin was deathly pale, her eyes sunken, and her hair a wild tangle of black locks that seemed to writhe like living serpents. She reached out a bony hand and touched my face, her touch cold and clammy. I felt a jolt of fear run through me, as if I was being pulled into some dark and ancient world. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, my head throbbing with pain. The alleyway was empty, except for a small piece of paper clutched in my hand. It had a single word scrawled on it: wait. I stumbled through the streets of Dead City, trying to make sense of the strange occurrences that had been happening around me. The whispers in the walls, the shadows moving on their own, the feeling of being watched. It was all taking its toll on my sanity. I knew I needed a place to stay, somewhere I could lock myself away and try to figure out what was going on. That's when I saw Oakwood House, a grand, Victorian mansion that loomed over the city like a specter. The building seemed to be shrouded in a perpetual gloom, as if it was trying to keep its secrets buried. I approached the house cautiously, feeling a sense of trepidation wash over me. Something about this place didn't feel right, but I pushed open the creaky front door and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The interior of the house was just as imposing as the exterior: dark, ornate wood paneling, cobweb-shrouded chandeliers, and walls that seemed to press in on me from all sides. I wandered from room to room, feeling like an intruder in someone else's home. And then I saw it, a photograph on the wall of a family I had never seen before. They were smiling, happy, but there was something about them that didn't add up. It was as if they were dead. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that Oakwood House was more than just an old mansion. It was a mausoleum, a place where the dead went to rest. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate footsteps that seemed to be coming from the very floor itself. I spun around, but there was no one there. The footsteps stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the house like a shroud. And then I saw them, the ghosts of Oakwood House. They were standing in the doorway, their eyes black as coal, their skin gray and decaying. They regarded me with a cold, dead stare, as if they had been waiting for me all along. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if I was rooted to the spot. The ghosts began to move towards me, their movements slow and deliberate. As they approached, I realized that I was staring into the faces of the dead, and I knew that I was doomed. The last thing I remember is the feeling of being pulled back through time, back to a place where the living were not welcome. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was no longer alone in Oakwood House. The ghosts that had haunted its halls for so long were now inside me, their presence a constant reminder that I was not my own master. I stumbled through the rooms, trying to make sense of what was happening to me. But every door I opened led only to more questions, more terrors. The whispers in the walls grew louder, more urgent, until I could feel them crawling under my skin like ants. And then I heard my own voice, a voice that was not mine, whispering back at me. "Emily," it said, "we've been waiting for you." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that settled over me, but it was no use. The possession had begun. I saw my own hands move on their own, typing out a message on the computer in front of me. It was a name, Lucas, and beneath it, a single word: mine. I knew then that I was no longer in control. The ghosts had taken over, using my body to communicate with the world outside. The days blurred together as I became more and more entrenched in this new reality. I would see visions of the past, flashes of life in Oakwood House, of laughter and love and loss. But they were all tainted by an underlying sense of malevolence, a feeling that something was not quite right. And then, one night, I saw him, Lucas. He stood before me, his eyes black as coal, his skin gray and decaying. "Welcome," he said, his voice like a sigh on the wind. "We've been waiting for you." I knew then that I was lost forever, trapped in this hellish world of possession and terror. And Lucas, oh God, Lucas, he was the one who had brought me here. I had been possessed for weeks, my mind a jumble of confusion and terror. Lucas's presence was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. But tonight was different. Tonight, something was different. The whispers in the walls grew louder, more urgent, until I could feel them crawling under my skin like ants. And then I heard it, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. A scream. It was a scream of rage, of fear, of pure, unadulterated terror. And it was coming from all around me, echoing off the walls of Oakwood House like 1,000 tiny knives slicing through my eardrums. I tried to run, but my legs were heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The scream grew louder, more intense, until I felt like I was going to explode. And then it stopped. The silence was oppressive, crushing me beneath its weight. I knew that something was coming, something terrible and wonderful all at once. The lights flickered, the shadows danced on the walls, and I saw him, Lucas, standing before me with eyes black as coal. "It's time," he said, his voice like a sigh on the wind. "Time for you to join us." And then everything went black. I woke up to the sound of screams. Screams that seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls of Oakwood House like 1,000 tiny knives slicing through my eardrums. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, as if it was rooted to the spot. And then I saw them, the faces in the crowd. Faces that were not faces at all, but twisted, grotesque parodies of humanity. They reached out to me, their hands grasping for mine like claws, and I knew that I was doomed. The night of 1,000 screams had begun, and I was right in the middle of it. As I stumbled through the streets of Dead City, I could feel the chaos unfolding around me. The screams of the possessed echoed off the buildings, mingling with the sound of shattering glass and crunching metal. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, making my skin crawl with unease. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The faces in the crowd seemed to shift and writhe like living things, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I stumbled through the streets, desperate to escape the madness that surrounded me. But every door I opened led only to more terror, more chaos. The city was descending into darkness, and I was trapped right in the middle of it. The sirens wailed in my ears, a cacophony of sound that threatened to drive me mad. I ducked into an alleyway, hoping to escape the worst of it. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I saw them, the twisted, corrupted creatures that seemed to be made of shadow and darkness. They moved with a crawling, slithering motion, their eyes fixed on me with an unspeakable hunger. I knew then that I was in grave danger. The city had become a living nightmare, and I was just a tiny, insignificant part of it. I stumbled through the alleys, desperate to find some way out of this hellish world. But every door I opened led only to more chaos, more terror, and I knew that I would never escape the crawling chaos of Dead City. I stumbled through the abandoned subway tunnels, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and I could feel the weight of countless unseen eyes upon me. Every step echoed off the concrete, making it seem like I was being followed by an army of unseen forces. I had been searching for a way out of Dead City for what felt like hours, but every tunnel seemed to lead only to more darkness and despair. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into the heart of the city's madness. I heard the sound of whispers, first soft, raspy voices that seemed to be coming from all around me. They spoke in hushed tones, their words indistinguishable but their malevolent intent clear. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source of the voices, but there was no one in sight. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw them, the abandoned souls. They floated through the tunnels like ghosts, their eyes black as coal, their skin gray and decaying. They seemed to be waiting for me, their very presence a manifestation of the city's darkest energies. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The souls closed in around me, their whispers growing louder, more urgent. I knew then that I was trapped in a living nightmare from which there was no escape. I stumbled through the darkened corridors of my own mind, pursued by the demons that lurked within. The whispers in my ear grew louder, more urgent, until I could feel them crawling under my skin like ants. "You're not safe," they whispered. "You'll never be safe." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it only seemed to intensify. Every step I took felt like a betrayal, every breath I made like a confession. The shadows on the walls seemed to twist and writhe like living things, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I saw my own fears reflected back at me, the fear of failure, the fear of loss, the fear of being alone. They loomed over me, towering and imposing, their presence suffocating. I knew then that I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror, with no escape from the horrors that haunted me. I tried to reach out for help, but my own hands seemed to be made of stone. My mind was a jumble of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, despair. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of my own making, unable to swim to the surface. And then I saw him, the embodiment of all my fears, come to life. He stood before me, his eyes blazing with an inner fire, his presence radiating an aura of unspeakable terror. "You're mine now," he hissed, his voice like a rusty gate scraping against concrete. "Forever and ever." I stood before the old mirror, its glass surface reflecting back a face that was not my own. The eyes were different, the skin pale and translucent. But it was the smile that caught me off guard, a cold, mirthless grin that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. I knew then that I was staring into the face of my past, of all the fears and doubts that had haunted me for so long. The ghosts of our past came flooding back, their whispers echoing through the corridors of my mind. Memories long buried began to surface, like ripples on a stagnant pond. I saw myself as a child, trembling with fear in the dark recesses of my bedroom. I saw myself as a teenager, struggling to find my place in the world. And I saw myself as an adult, standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of uncertainty. I tried to turn away, but the mirror seemed to hold me fast, its gaze piercing and unyielding. The ghosts of our past closed in around me, their presence suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of my own making, unable to escape the weight of all that had come before. And then I saw her, the woman who had haunted me for so long. She stood before me, her eyes blazing with a fierce and unyielding intensity. "You'll never be free," she whispered, her voice like a cold wind blowing through my mind. "You'll never escape." I knew then that I was trapped in a cycle of pain and suffering, forever bound to the ghosts of our past. I stood before the monstrosity that had been spawned from the darkness of my own mind. It towered over me, its presence radiating an aura of unspeakable horror. The eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, as if they were windows to a realm of madness and despair. I tried to take a step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The creature began to move towards me, its movements slow and deliberate, like a giant predator stalking its prey. I could feel its hot breath on my skin, making my flesh crawl with revulsion. The hands reached out, long and spindly fingers that seemed to be made of shadow and darkness. They wrapped around my wrists, holding me fast in a grip that was both crushing and feeble at the same time. I felt like I was being pulled apart, my very soul being torn from its moorings. The creature's eyes seemed to bore into my mind, unleashing a torrent of memories and fears that had been locked away for so long. I saw myself as a child, trembling with fear in the dark recesses of my bedroom. I saw myself as a teenager, struggling to find my place in the world. And I saw myself as an adult, standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of uncertainty. The creature's grip tightened, its fingers digging deep into my skin like talons. I felt like I was being consumed by the very darkness that had spawned it. And then everything went black. I awoke to find myself lying on the cold, hard floor, the creature looming over me like a specter of doom. Its eyes seemed to be burning with an inner fire, as if they were fueled by my own darkest fears. As I lay on the cold, hard floor, I felt my mind slipping away from me. The creature's eyes seemed to be burning with an inner fire, as if they were fueled by my own darkest fears. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The world around me began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting reality. I saw visions of the past and present colliding in a maelstrom of chaos. I saw myself as a child, playing with toys that seemed to come to life and devour me whole. I saw myself as a teenager, struggling to find my place in the world, only to be rejected and ridiculed by those who were supposed to love me. And I saw myself as an adult, standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of uncertainty. I felt like I was being pulled apart, my very soul being torn from its moorings. The creature's grip seemed to be tightening, its fingers digging deep into my skin like talons. I knew then that I had crossed beyond the veil of sanity, and there was no turning back. I saw the face of madness staring back at me, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien, saying words that I couldn't understand but somehow knew to be true. "I am the monster," it said. "I am the one who has been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, I have you right where I want you." I felt a cold wind blowing through my mind, extinguishing what was left of my sanity. The world went black, and I knew that I was gone, lost beyond the veil of madness forever.